Okay, so now we're going to just go over um, some of the information about how exactly the workflow relates to the database, how the workflow definition relates to the database. There are some important things to understand about Workflow First. Firstly is that the whole of your application configuration is hierarchical. Workflow First is actually built using Workflow First, so it uses the same structure, it looks pretty similar. We bootstrapped it when we developed it so that we're using our own dog food. We're basically using the same technology that you're using to create your applications, to create Workflow First itself. So that makes everything very familiar, which should actually help you with understanding how to use your application. Now, as I said, everything is hierarchical. So the workflow definition is also hierarchical. If I click on workflows from the application tab, click on my workflow, and then I click on, say, enter ticket. Now this takes me to the enter ticket stage record, because it is actually a record in a database. You can see whereabouts in the database that you are looking at the breadcrumb at the top. You see we're in the applications list, demo app, in the model, application tabs, we're in tickets, inside tickets, we're inside a workflow called tickets also, and then we're in stages and we're in the enter ticket stage. I can drill down further by using these drill down options right here. Click input field. Now you can see if I click on one of these fields, for example, then we're going down even further. Now we're inside enter ticket and we're looking at the input field. Okay, if we go back to the application tab, that was the workflow, but also the most important part of the application tab are the list of fields defined in the tab. So these are the list of all of the fields, all of the field definitions, the actual fields of the database. It collects all of these together as you're defining the workflow. And you can see it's hierarchical here because we have a nested list called worklog. If you click the plus next to that, it will take you to the list of fields inside worklog. You can have nested lists inside nested lists. You can keep nesting them. You can have as many levels deep as you like. There's really no limit. So you can create incredibly complex structured applications. You can really structure many different aspects of your business that you may think are very complicated. But as soon as you put them into a hierarchical data structure, a folder-like structure, it actually becomes very manageable because it's very easy to break things down into subcategories and then sub-subcategories and so forth. It makes everything compartmentalized so you can then manage that particular aspect of your business. Very, very useful. And you can also add workflow at any particular stage. If I click on the worklog nested field, which is actually a nested list, I can actually add workflow to this right here by clicking here. And that lets me have a whole new workflow just under a worklog. Now you can imagine just how rich you can make your application by adding workflow in sublists, adding sublists inside that workflow and so forth. It's very, very expandable, very scalable, and that is really the key to scaling the application from something very simple to something very comprehensive that models everything in your business. So these are the fields inside the ticket. These are the actual field definitions. If we go back to the workflow, we click on the workflow here, and we look at, for example, the fields selected inside enter ticket. These are basically the input fields for the form in the stage. These are not really the actual fields themselves. If you want to go to the actual field definition, you need to click on the existing field, the link right here. See, these are actually links. If I click on this link here, it'll take me to tickets, nested fields, and it'll take me to the actual title field itself in the application tab. I can then edit this and I can add a lot more different options. So you'll see here I have the name title. I can override the title to be something different to the name. I can start a group title. I can add an icon to it, which will show up in several places. I can change the data type here as before. But there are other options like having a drop-down list, an existing type, linking it like we saw before. But there are collapsed items here too, which give you a lot more different options. If I click display settings, I can change the default value. Now this is basically the value it's going to have if I don't enter anything in. I can make it a calculated field by putting in an expression. I can specify a format code for dates and numbers. I can say that the list is going to be sorted by this particular field. There's options long list, which is actually to do with a nested list. We'll go into that later. The summary, the display level, currently set to summary. This will tell you whether it's going to show up in the list or whether it will only show up on the actual form. If I change this to detail, it will mean that it will only show up on the form. It won't show up on the list. That's also useful because you don't want all fields to show up in the list as columns. Sometimes you only want them to show up when you click on the actual record. Visible condition, again, is for nested lists, if you want that to be visible. Enabled when, you can put a condition here that will make that field enabled only if a certain other condition is met, if they change something else on the form. You can also hide fields completely if you just want to use them for, maybe you want to use them in scripting only. And also whether it's a title field, whether this is actually the title of the record. And there's things like custom field viewer, which lets you specify some sort of add-ins so you can have your own different types of way of editing and viewing that field using HTML coding, something we'll get into in another video. There's another area called entry settings, where you can specify whether it's mandatory. That means it has to be entered in. It won't let you get away with not entering it in. Whether it's calculated, that means it's not editable. Whether it has to be unique in the list. If you try adding in something twice, it will give you an error. And also whether it's a quick entry field. Quick entry is something which you saw us entering fields very quickly. It's a little area above a list. If I click on the demo app, you'll see it right here. This is a quick entry. If you select certain fields to be quick entry fields, then they will show up here and you can enter them in and click add, and it was a quick way of actually entering in records without having to click the plus and type everything else in a form. Let's just go back to that list. And then under description text, we can put in some text here, which will actually show up as a tooltip. Let's see, like this, for example, we see this little tooltip that says if this field begins a new group, specify the text of the group here. That is actually whatever you enter into the description down here. So that's an easy way of adding help into your application to make it more user-friendly. Now, there's one particular problem that we were trying to resolve when we were looking at this, and that is the assigned to list was going to be restricted to a particular user, and we wanted to say, well, we don't want that necessarily to happen. We want them to be able to select any user. So we can actually click on assign to. Now, this is actually an advanced option. So to get to the advanced options, you have to click the ... here, because we hide them, because we don't want to clutter the display. So you click ... and you click on advanced, and then you click on plus. There's an option in here, and I'm not going to go through all of them because these are advanced options. There's no point in doing it now. It will just confuse you. But there's an option in here called suppress link security. And if you set that to yes, it will show everything in that list, in that user list, and it won't actually apply the security role that restricts it to just see your own user. So this may be something that you actually see happen quite often when you want to select users. So probably an important thing to understand how it works. You just have to set that to yes and click OK. And that has changed how the assigned to link will now work. Now it will show it every single user in that drop-down list. That is where you actually change some of the more advanced options to do with fields that you create in your workflow. So if I go to the escalate stage, I click the escalate stage here, this assigned to field we see in the input field list is linked to that field that we just edited a second ago. So I can click this and I'll see I have now advanced up here, which shows up in bold to say that I've even though that's an optional drill down, it's been entered in, so it will show up in bold. And you'll see that we have the suppress link security set to yes option right there. Okay, that's how you resolve that particular problem, and that gives you a bit of an overview of how the field editing the workflow options. The Let's also talk a little bit about form layout and grouping. Now, we don't have any really complicated field layout or form layout to deal with here. So, you know, I'm going to give you some sort of basic overview of grouping, but it's not going to be particularly meaningful at this point because we just don't have complex forms here to deal with. But basically, when you create your input fields, you can specify something called a group title. When you specify a group title, now in here it's under the other field settings, but we have new group title right here. When you specify a group title, it puts this little title above the field or the fields to group them together, so that it can actually be pretty useful. We can just put some more details right there, and I'll just show that to you by going ahead and publishing that. Okay, go back to our tickets tab. Now when I click enter ticket, you'll see we have our some more details group heading right here above details, which allows us to group that together. Now what we don't have though is the ability to collapse it. Now that is actually quite a useful feature. So I'm just going to show you how we do that. If you click on the details existing field here, we can add a flag in here called collapse group. We're going to add that flag to the details field, and now we're going to publish it and see what difference that makes. Now you can see that our details field actually disappears. It's inside this some more details group. When I click that, it shows up. I can click it again to collapse it again. That can be very useful when you have very large forms with lots of different information in there. Just one of the many layout options that you actually have when you're creating these forms. There are some other flags actually in here which could also be very useful. I'm just going to go over a couple of them right now. One of them is extra large. Let's add that onto one of our fields right now, onto the title field. So we're going to go to our list of nested fields, our field definitions, click on title, and we're going to add in extra large to the title field. What this does, if I just go ahead and publish that, what this does is it actually makes the title field span the entire width of the screen. That can be useful when you know that it's going to be more than just a few words and you don't want it to kind of scroll over and limit you to just a small little area. So we have this title, we can type in something really long here. Like this is some really, really long text that I can type into this field without it being blocked. Okay, that's one of the options. Another option that's worth mentioning is admin only. Admin only is an option that means it'll only appear if you're logged in as admin. If you're not logged in as admin, you won't see this field. It won't be part of your edit forms, and it won't show up in the list. They just cannot see it at all. A similar option is admin edit only. That means that only an admin can edit it, but anyone else can see it. And lastly, another useful option is actually hide if unset. What that does is it hides the field from the form unless it's been set. Not from the edit form, but when you're looking at the record itself, it won't show it. It actually won't include it in the form layout unless it's been set. And if you have a default value, that means it has to be set to something other than the default value. Okay, that's a few of the options for the field definitions. Next, we're going to go into looking at some other aspects of WorkflowFirst.